Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm gonna I'm gonna call this meeting to order. I'm Jerry White's consulting planner. This is a meeting of the Houston Planning and Zoning Commission for June 26, 2024. Hereby open up the meeting, call to order, and note for the record that we have all planning commissioners present with the exception of Jeff Horney, who sends his regrets. We also have in the audience three of our city council members, the mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and then Tina, another council member. Items on the agenda for tonight are to approve the minutes, and then we have a training on public hearing procedures, which I'll do, and then if we have any other business, we'll take that up, and then we'll adjourn. I expect this presentation, depending on questions, answers, stuff like that, should not be, definitely will not go more than an hour and a half. Maybe it's more like an hour, depending on how fast we can move through it. So, with that said, excuse me, the minutes have been sent out in advance, and you have a copy of them on your table there. Are there any calls for corrections, additions, deletions, anything of that sort?
I make motion to accept the minutes.
We have a motion to accept the minutes. Is there a
I'll
second?
second that.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Unanimous. Okay. Commissioners, with your permission, I'll launch right into what our purpose is for tonight, which is a training module on public hearing procedures. Okay? So, let's see here. What I'll, let's see. Oh, I went too far. What we'll cover in this presentation is a little bit of introductory remarks, some basics about public hearing procedures and procedures of the commission, a good bit about how to make motions and related actions. Then if we want to take time, I've got plenty of slides for do's and don'ts, things that you should do, things that you should not do. And then there's some pre-formulated questions that we can go through, and the answer, before we display the answer, we can talk about it and see then what did I think the answer was. Also, questions and comments. Anytime you have those, feel free. This is not a one-sided thing. It's supposed to be participatory. And so if you have questions, comments, you want to make comments, feel free to jump right in, and we'll be fine with that. Any questions before we go? Okay. Let me see a minute. Did I skip one? Oh, it is up there. Okay. What I wanted to say, I tried. This can be a really dry exercise. Not a whole lot of fun to listen to somebody for over an hour. But I tried to break it up a little bit with some cartoons from an urban planner. These urban planning cartoons were out of a publication called Practicing Planner, which was a national publication that ran for about 13 years, and I was the editor of that, pleased to say. It's the only national publication of certified planners, and every quarter it would have a cartoon by a planner. He's out of, I think he's in Kentucky. And so just a sort of an idea to give you a little bit of amusement as we go along the way. Some of these I think you can relate. Like, for example, this one, if you can't read it, it says Planning Commission public hearing tonight, and there's people with their torches, and they're fired up, and they're saying, "Get your torches, save our property values, charge on to it, stop the big box monster. We moved here to get away from Frankenstein," etc. So, keep going. So, the basic rule package that we follow is called Robert's Rules of Order, And actually, this presentation is already out of date. I found out, I think we're on version number 12 of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. One of the things when we get into this, it's best to back up and say that we are a small group, and Robert's Rules of Order was constructed for large legislative assemblies like Parliament or Congress. And of course, we don't have to go through that sort of rigor, attention to detail, etc., formalities. We can run our hearings a lot less formal than that, but you have rules for the 1% of the time that you really need them. 99% of the time, we're going to get along. We're going to have cordial audiences who don't give us any trouble, but we're preparing for the worst here and understand that you need to, as new commissioners, you've probably been in meetings where you follow a lot of these rules anyway, and so we take them and we try and follow them, but let's not be overly zealous about it. For example, I don't think we really need a parliamentarian to decide points of order or anything like that, like they would in Congress. But yet, if there is an issue, then someone should be assigned. That can be usually the chair, or the chair would, or in the case of city council, would ask the city attorney, who's usually very adept at understanding what the rules of order are and instruct folks on what to do. So the Robert's Rules of Order are the rules of the commission when we need them. And so we try and go a lot more simple than that, but I'm going to cover probably more tonight than you ever really care to know about those rules. And if you've ever seen this book, Robert's Rules of Orders, it's hundreds of pages. And I've been through it, not the whole thing, but looking through it many times. And I tell you what, it'll even put PhD types to sleep, trying to read all that. So it's not a lot of fun, but anyway, moving on. This is a really important one. When you find that something is just not right with the procedure that's being followed, you can raise a point of order. This means that you believe some type of a rule has been broken. Somebody's speaking out of turn, or there's maybe a person in the audience that is conversing and they're doing it loudly in a way that disrupts the meeting. That may be something where you say, point of order, Madam Chairman, there's folks in the audience that are their voices are too loud, and we need to restore order, etc. You don't need a second. Somebody doesn't have to second your motion or your point that there's a point of order and that you think a rule has been broken. Any examples of this that people can think of? How about somebody makes a motion and then they start talking and talking and talking without a second? At some point, somebody would say, point of order, Madam Chairman. I believe we have a motion, but we did not get a second. And the chair will resolve any kind of issues over points of order, or if they feel necessary, they can have the commission members debate the issue and then decide it by majority vote. Stop me if you have any questions. Okay, decorum is really, really important. Georgia Municipal Association now is rewarding city councils who adopt so-called City of Civility, meaning they want people to follow civil practices. And so we have to remain respectful, professional. We need to direct all of our remarks to the presiding officer, which is the chair, not to the audience. We'll see that's a frequent no-no where an applicant will turn around and start facing the audience and not even turning their back to the planning commission, that's a no-no. If you see that, we say, please direct your attention to the planning commission, not to the audience. We don't want to talk about people on a personal standpoint. This seems pretty self-explanatory, but it is inappropriate to bring personal matters into the meeting. You cannot speak until you've been recognized by the presiding officer. Here's another one that we don't have to rigidly follow all the time. If we're not trying to talk on top of one another, then maybe it's not that necessary to specifically ask the chair for the floor, but that's really how it's done. You do not speak unless you have the floor, and that's why you'll see anything, if you watch other meetings or Congress or whatever, the person in charge always said the chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, or the gentlewoman from Kentucky, whatever it might be. So it is best that you get recognized and not to speak until you are recognized, but use your own judgment on that. If we don't have to get super formal on it, it may be that nobody's trying to talk over you, and you can jump right in and say, well, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a comment or something like that. You don't have to rigidly say, will you recognize me for some remarks? We just don't really have to get that formal, but the rules are there when we need them. Okay. Typical order of any business or agenda, you have a pretty set format, and we don't have to follow this all the time, but we generally think about it, and you'll see your agendas are set up this way. You call the meeting to order. You can have a roll call. I've seen that done where if it's obvious, like tonight, we knew who was here and who's not here. Why waste a couple of minutes saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here? But there's nothing wrong with doing that either. Pledge of Allegiance is something that is optional. We don't have it on the agenda. Also, there's always a lot of debate about prayer. And some places, some groups like to open up with a prayer. And there'd be a lot of debate on that. I can tell you what Jefferson has done. It's best to separate, quote, church and state according to our Constitution. In my own view, I mean, and I'll go ahead and admit, I'm a Christian, but it doesn't mean that we have to assert our own religious preferences in the meetings. And it's better to be separate altogether. And if you do a prayer, then it's really it's a slippery slope to do it, because if you do it, then the first one may be a Christian prayer, and then what about the atheists out there that you just offended? Or what about the Buddhist, or the Muslim, or the Jew? Whatever or whoever's religion it is. And then if you're going to have prayer, then how do you do that in a fair way where you're not having the same reverend or same Christian preachers come in and do your prayer? So it's just best to stay away from it altogether, in my view. Debate, reaction, comment? Scott?
I don't have a comment about prayer, but before we go too much further, I wanted to try to draw a distinction between a point of order and a point of personal privilege.
I don't think there's any such thing as a point of personal privilege, is there?
My understanding there is.
I've heard Marjorie Taylor Greene say that, and they said there is no such thing.
Okay.
Anybody? I mean, what?
My understanding is that a point of personal privilege is if I think there is something going on that could harm either the city or people in the room, I can interrupt and say, I'd like a point of personal privilege, and state what it is. Well, that's what, a point of order is the meeting is not being carried out as it
That's
should be
right.
carried out.
That's right.
Whereas a point of personal privilege is, I think the council or the commission is voting on something that could harm ultimately the city, or I think somebody's passed out in the back and I don't know why, and we need to stop this meeting and address this health issue in the back of the meeting. I just, you know, a point of order is, in my interpretation, is how we're running the meeting versus a point of personal privilege is, I think something is amiss or being voted on incorrectly and should be stopped. Yeah, that would be harmful to the city. It really, this is just something personal to me, but I just wanted to see if,
So, yeah, according to Robert's Rules of Order, questions of privilege affecting assembly may include matters of comfort, amplification, or safety.
Okay.
So,
So it's too cold in here,
exactly. Exactly.
or it's too hot in here,
Or somebody, it's too noisy.
too noisy. Okay, I got it. As long as we're bringing it up, I think the pledge is important. I think we should add that to our agenda and have it every time we meet.
I'm in agreement with you. I was gonna bring that up as well. I think we can look to the city council for an example. I mean, they do the pledge and they do a prayer. And I think we're probably flexible enough that if someone wants to do a Muslim prayer or a Jewish prayer, we could probably accommodate that without, you know, a big deal.
I would be all for a pledge, but I think a prayer is a slippery slope. Why even bother with it? We all have our own ideas and beliefs and so on, but why do they have to be public?
I think Madam Mayor has something to say.
Of course.
Absolutely.
How do you all feel about, instead of a prayer, because I've thought about this multiple times, a moment of silence for your personal.
That's good, and you can address it however you personally choose to.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want me to put it on the agenda as prayer or moment of silence? Just moment of silence. All right, that's pretty objective and neutral, isn't it? Okay. All right, consider it done. If I can remember that, next agenda we'll have that. If not, you'll get on to me about missing.
We'll modify it.
Yeah. Okay, so call to order, roll call, pledge allegiance, prayer or moment of silence. Approval of the prior meeting minutes. Normally you take care of those. Did we do that this time or did I skip over that? We did? Okay. All right, and by the way, Madam Chair, I gave you a copy there to sign. Make sure I get that. We need to keep signed copies of these minutes. Okay. So then we have, number 5 is approval of the agenda. The city council does that. I don't know that you need it, but I think you could always, we can put that on the agenda also if you'd like to see that. That way, if there is something that somebody wants to bring up, that's the opportunity to maybe request that something else be on the agenda. We want to be careful about that. We don't normally like to add something just because a member wants to add it to the agenda, because you're supposed to be able to have time to be prepared for the meeting, and how do you prepare for something that's a complete surprise to you? So normally we would not, but is there... You could put right after roll call, you could put recognitions. Like I said, I think it's appropriate we have elected city council members here in the audience, and I think it's appropriate that we recognize those for anybody who's watching that may not realize that, you know, these. So we could, I would add it after pledge of after roll call. I don't have roll call on here either. Yeah, I just made your agenda twice as long. No, these are small items though. And recognitions. All right. So while we're at it, anything else that come across? So approval of the current agenda. Then you take up old business if there's any old business. So if you tabled an item, you postpone it the last time, it's customary for that to be the first item, first substantive item back on the agenda. Then we deal with new business. These are going to be your cases for variances, rezones, etc. We do not normally have an item for public comment. The city council does, but you can. If you want that on your agendas, just say so, and we'll put it on there.
Put an option in each of the items that come up for public comment, and that's there, so you need it as a separate one, or since it's done on each one? Last time you were here, you asked for public comment on every one you went through.
Yeah. Well, it's for those comments that people may have that don't relate to those agenda items. If you want to comment on one of the items on the agenda, then we stratify that into right. Yeah. Well, that could have been read either way. It could have been that that's not necessarily on the agenda, but yeah, it might be that, hey, I see you have a problem in the city with such and such, and the planning commission should take up the cause of trying to make the city more beautiful, or we have garbage strewn around and we'd like to see you do something about that, or we need more shopping centers, or, you know, whatever it might be that's relevant to your job. It's fair to hear that. So is there any opposition to having public comment on it? Well, we certainly will do that, because that's a procedural thing that we have to do. We do have to have public hearings on, you conduct hearings on rezonings, variances, conditional uses, not plats. And so, yeah, we will, by definition, we'll be doing that. And then this would be just for anybody else who had something they wanted to say. Scott?
So, for me, since we're a recommending body, I would rather, if somebody wants to talk about trash or something, I would rather them direct that at our legislators, and then our legislators say, hey, Madam Chair, this has come up to us from the citizens. We would like that discussed at the next Planning and Zoning Commission. Does that make sense?
I agree
Because
with that myself. I don't know how the rest of the commission
I just think that
feels.
people think they can come in here and go, I want y'all to start talking about this. Well, we're leaving out our legislative body that they elected to talk
Yeah.
about those things. So I think
Fair
I would
point.
Well, I think
rather-
whether it's on the agenda or not, I mean, they could do it.
Yeah.
They still might come in and say, hey, I want you to talk about this, at which point in time, we turn it over, and the chairperson would say, thank you for your input, but that really needs to be addressed to city council, and their next meeting is...
Yeah, and they have a public session beforehand, and then
Yeah.
they want us to talk about it, then we can talk.
I think if it was appropriate to the agenda that's on the table for that meeting, you have a public comment section. If it's not, then you don't have it.
Well, in that case, it's built into each agenda item if we're going to have a public hearing. So I would say, I would tend to agree with Scott, and that is, let's not put it on there, on the agenda.
Let's
Well-
not create problems for us.
My only thought, my only thought is, in the spirit of transparency, is we want to make sure that the public feels comfortable coming to us if they have an issue. You know, we only meet 12 times a year, and sometimes the public is not privy to what we might be discussing. So somebody comes up and says, holy crap, you know, we need an overhead walkway between Kroger's and Publix because it's so dangerous crossing 53. And we may not see that, and I just would like the public to have an avenue, not for us to address it, not for us to make a decision, but for them to come and say, hey, please put a sky walkway over the two shopping centers or something like that. So, you know, that they feel safe and comfortable coming to us. That's just my thought.
Fair point. We've heard both sides.
Oh, I agree with that. What you don't want is someone saying, well, a trash pickup has not been, you know, my street is dirty, or, no, that has nothing to do with what we're doing.
Right. And what I'd like to see is for our chairwoman to have the flexibilities, you know, say, okay, you know, let's listen to Joe the rag man talk 2 minutes about something, and then have the flexibility to cut it off and say, we hear you, and we'll address it, because we're not going to address any of those open comments immediately. People just want to be heard, and I think that just goes a long way for public trust and confidence.
Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you for saying that, and I would love it if they put in the planning and zoning minutes, which you brought up, and that, referred to them for action or attention, whatever. So it's clearly that you're hearing them, because you're right, we build public trust, certainly trust among all of you with, Mayor. With the commission. Also, whatever that final so the city council meeting is 5, but you guys can do whatever you like.
Isn't that related to what's on the agenda, though?
It is.
So this would, I think what we're talking about is things unrelated to what is on
No,
the agenda.
it's also citizen input.
Oh, okay.
Yes, both.
But I think the takeaway is just public confidence, public trust. And sometimes people just want to be heard.
We'll all work together.
I
Absolutely.
agree. Letting people know that you can come here and talk, and it says on here that I can make public comment, and so
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it. This
Exactly.
might be the right place, in which case, then we would instruct them that, but like you say, it's in the minutes, it's been recorded, we've heard it, and they've been redirected. If they choose to go to the next step in city council, then they can. If they don't, then we've at least got.
Yeah, I see 3 ways of handling it, and then I'll turn it over to the commission. One is to elect not to have public comment. One is elect to have a standing point on your agenda that's public comment. A third alternative would be under other business, leave it to the chair or any other member to kind of sense the crowd and say, we have some people in the audience that I believe are, you know, you may have heard they want to speak, and then you could say, is there any objection to hearing from the public at this time? And that way it's not on there every single time, but it's there if you need it. I don't know if that's the wise thing to do or not.
I like option 2.
Put it on the agenda. Somebody want to make a motion on this one?
I'll make a motion that we do option 2 and put it on the agenda
So it's on the agenda each time.
and use it as, you know, it's there. It's a placeholder.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, unanimous. It will go on the agenda. Okay, the only other item on that list is to adjourn. So,
I do have one question.
okay,
So I know from time to time that the city council will adjourn for executive session, and I'm just requiring, is that something that we need to do? And I don't know what type of situations that happens, and if it's stuff that maybe we want to talk amongst ourselves during a meeting, but not necessarily be open. I don't know the rules and how that, if we need something like that, or maybe it's a non-issue. I don't know. I just bring it up.
You don't have a reason for executive session because that's limited to the city council under certain conditions of law, and that is litigation, property, personnel, or when they can go into executive session. Otherwise, they can't, and they have to announce the reason for going into executive session. So you definitely don't need that. There's another word called recess. Maybe there's, maybe the meeting's gone on for 2 hours and people are like really need a bathroom break or whatever, or for whatever reason you want to recess. Motion to recess for 5 minutes. You can do that. Now, I wouldn't encourage you to do that to what you were saying about to talk amongst yourselves. I'd rather you not look at it as an opportunity to be off the record. We want to be as transparent as possible and have all of your discussions in the public limelight and visible and where everybody can hear it. In fact, while I'm at it, I would say side conversations, whispering to your planning commissioner beside you, you really shouldn't even do that because it looks like you're not paying attention, or if you are paying attention, you're, trying to do something that may not be the best thing to do. So it's best to avoid that. Best to avoid it. Okay?
That's fine. I just thought I'd bring it up. That's all. Okay.
Oops. Let me go back to that. I did. I don't want to miss this one. This one's funny. We have planners. We call it a lot of things. There's a lot of acronyms. NIMBY, not in my backyard. Have you ever heard of CAVE? Citizens Against Virtually Everything. And then you have BANANA. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. And this one's a takeoff on that, really. It's like, so somebody wants to come in and put a preserve. Who's going to object to a nature preserve? Well, somebody is in this case. Leave us alone. We don't want it. Stop it. Okay. All right. Okay, can you abstain on a motion? I think generally you should not abstain. Do not use it as a crutch where you can't decide how to vote. You're on a position here to make a decision, make a recommendation. You need to make it, and don't shy away from it. There may be, the only reason you'd really abstain is when you have a conflict of interest, and then you would recuse yourself and indicate why. And that's the next slide on here, is to talk about conflict of interest. But really, you should not abstain for any reason other than a conflict of interest. Okay, there's a lot of words here, but what you need to know here is that the Planning Commission is subject to state law that has to do with conflicts of interest. And basically, there's a lot of things that people think that they feel like it might be a perceived conflict of interest, and it's not under the law. The law is limited to if you have a property interest in real property affected by a zoning action or whatever it might be, or you have a financial interest in a business entity which has a property interest. So the key words here are real property interests, or you have a member of the family who has an interest. Okay? Now, I've had like a former mayor ask, well, I live right next to this thing. There's a rezoning. I live next to it. Do I have a conflict of interest? Well, no, you have an interest, but you don't have a property interest in that. You're going to have times where stuff is very close to you and maybe even personal, and other times where it doesn't seem to affect your neighborhood or your house or your life at all. And so I would say that if you feel like you have a conflict, even though it doesn't meet this strict definition, and you want to suggest that you'll recuse yourself because you're not comfortable making that decision for some sort of reason, then I think maybe you could do that. That's somewhat in conflict with the statement of don't abstain unless you have a conflict. But if you feel like you have a conflict, I think that's good enough reason for you not to vote, because I wouldn't want to tell somebody, well, vote anyway when you're not. Now, that's not to say because you're not sure how to vote or you're afraid to vote or something like that. Don't use that as a crutch. But if you have something that you have an issue with conflict-wise, then you think it's a conflict even though it doesn't meet the state law definition, I would say you can go ahead and you can abstain, you can pull yourself out of there. So what do you do if you have a conflict? Well, according to the state law, you're supposed to disclose it in writing before the meeting. So you really need to pay attention to your agenda in advance, and if you have something that you have a conflict on, and that needs to be disclosed in writing to the governing authority. So you're talking about basically sending that to the city clerk. And then you have to disqualify yourself from voting, and you cannot take any other action on behalf of yourself or other person to influence the action on that application. Now, what does that mean? It means that at minimum, you should get up from the table. If I'm saying, on this item Z2402, I have a conflict of interest because my brother works for the company that's bringing this forward. So I have a family member who has an interest in that company, and that may make me partial to the case. So I'm going to recuse myself, and then what you do is you get up, you physically get up from the table. You say, I'm going to recuse myself, and you remove yourself from the table. And most people will go sit in the audience. And that's probably okay. I don't see a reason if they're going to sit there quietly, but even somebody sitting in the audience could still somehow influence the decision with a nasty look at the right time. Might be trying to influence the decision by, even though you're not supposed to. So I would even go so far as to say it's best to even leave the room and have somebody come back as soon as you're done with that item. Somebody will come back in and tell you, we're done with that. Come on back and reseat yourself. So it's really up to you. That might be a little harsh for somebody who wants to find out, wants to see what happened. And if you're sitting in the back and you're not trying to make hand gestures or faces of expression and stuff like that, then you're probably okay. Use your own judgment. Questions? This is a pretty important one. The city council is also subject to this. Okay? Oops. Trigger happy here. Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
So, conflict of interest and ethics. So, I know as a city council person, I was not supposed to divulge how I was going to vote on something before the actual vote was taken. I wasn't supposed to go talk to an applicant and tell them how I was going to vote or whatever. How does those, and then if they violated those, in theory, they were supposed to be brought before a hearing, and the ethics committee was going to hear the complaint, not evidence. Then the ethics committee heard the complaint and decided if they felt like there was enough information to move it to an actual ethics hearing, where the elected officials, if then the evidence presents that they did violate their ethics, could be fined or serve time in jail or be removed from the council. Is this similar to that here, or do we have a code of ethics that we have to operate by, or?
No, you really don't have a, well, Mayor, do you know, is there an ethics code in the city? And all board members are required to adhere to it, I would think. So there's an item of business, let me make a note to,
I would assume
fine.
we would want to operate under that same code of ethics that our elected officials have to. There should be no behind-the-scenes discussions or trying to exert influence or telling somebody how you're gonna vote on something before it happens.
yeah, all right, well, lesson one there is we're gonna find out what your ethics requirements are. Law is different from ethics, but ethics code, there is a planner's code of ethics for certified planners, and then there's an association set of ethical principles for all planners that it's optional, it's recommended, it's not a mandate. And so, I mean, at minimum, I could give you that, the areas of responsibility for that the planning profession, the American Planning Association talks about. But you're going to another point. Let's spend a couple of minutes on it, and that is, remember, you guys are a recommending body, and so developers, I'll say this as politely as I can, they're not going to be that interested in you because you're not the decision maker. And they're going to spend their time and money on the people who have a vote on it. That's the city council. But that doesn't mean that they might not. I mean, they're also, most of the time, they're shrewd and understand that it's not meaningless what they're going through here, and a recommendation in their favor by the planning commission is of significant value as opposed to having one where it's a motion against them. So that might justify, in their own view, spending some time trying to talk to you. Now, what I tell every city council member that I talk to, and every planning commission by extension, what I recommend is I say it, and I've said this to probably all three of the folks here, I don't know, but the idea is that, you know, we have a very public process that is set out by state law for how we deal with these. We're following public hearing procedures. We're following rules of law. We have criteria to go by, and you guys are volunteers. You're not paid a dime. Even, I mean, maybe you have expenses and you can get money for going to visit a site or something, but you're not compensated. You're not expected to spend a lot of time. So why not, the process that's set out for you, why not believe in that process, confine yourself to that process, and it's a safe way of going through it. And so when the developer calls you and says, I'm on the agenda next Thursday night, this is a pretty big rezoning, we've been working hard on it, we got a good project, and we'd really love to tell you more about it, because we're only going to have a few minutes to tell you about it. And the best answer, in my opinion, is don't do it. Just tell them, kindly decline it and say, I'm going to get my information through the normal channels of the process. There's a staff report that gets written. I'm going to look at that. We're going to have a public hearing. I'm going to go in objectively and listen to what people have to say, and then I'm going to make a recommendation. The rule I like to tell people, and I don't know if they would ever do this, but I say, are you comfortable, if you're going to meet with them, are you comfortable coming in the meeting before that meeting is announced and say, I want to disclose that I had lunch with Mr. Developer X over here, and we talked about how he wants this thing to be approved, and he gave me all these reasons, and here's all these reasons why. You're it's called ex parte communication, meaning there's a party that's not they are part of it, but they're out of sequence with what they're asking you to do. And that's just not going to look good, even for planning commissioners who you don't have to worry about whether, you get voted in next time. Maybe you worry about your appointment being reappointed the next time. But it's just best to sidestep all that and say, we've got a process to follow. And honestly, I mean, why not make it sound a little selfish? Like, look, I'm a part-time, unpaid person. You want me to spend my hours of time talking to you on something that I'm going to read the staff report, I'm going to attend the hearing, I'm going to attend the meeting, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the best way, in my opinion, is just avoid the appearance of impropriety or a conflict of interest. Now, there's nothing that says you can't go. I mean, honestly, you can have lunch. And let me add to that.
Maybe he wants to take all of us to lunch.
Could be. Or sometimes they say, I'm going to rent a van. I want you to go see our project down in Snellville. And we're going to rent a van, and everybody that wants to, we'll go down here, and and you're a captive audience for 3 hours. But let me say this, I'm preaching something that is not law, okay? There's not a law that says you can't talk to members. So in the end, you can use your own judgment. Now, the council members, they're able to do that, and if they want to, I caution against it, but they're able to do that. And they can do their caucusing, so forth, talking on the phone. I mean, that's the politics of city council, is it not? I mean, you don't go into a meeting and go, well, I'm really in favor of this project, and I'm going to keep that to myself, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to advocate when the time comes. No, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that happens with council members. I don't see the need for planning commissioners to do that. I mean, it's just a recommendation, but the council can caucus and talk to each other, and they do. They usually know what the vote, pretty close to what the vote's going to be before they go into the meeting. Comments on it, Dave?
Dr. Weiss did advise me of that, and I heed to that. We have to pay a planning engineer very well to do that job. And I'd say 99% of the time I take that advice. If I'm not taking it, then we don't need it. He's very good at it. He's very thorough. I will tell you another thing. I don't visit the developer, but I always visit the development. Because for me, to see a picture in my mind that they're wanting to place something here, there, and so forth, it really helps me. And I try to do it in all hours, when I can just go out there and look at the land. And when I think, oh, HUD, this is what it could mean, and so forth, it gives me a better picture. But Dr. Weiss also gave me some other advice that keeps me very well. Instead of talking to the developer, I listen to what the people out here that vote me in say, and what they want, and if it's good for them. I don't really care if it's good for the developer or for the salesperson, but I do care if it's good for the city. So we try to look at it like that.
Mayor?
So, Jerry, you said earlier about the ex parte, so if a council member meets with the developer for lunch and they talk about their project, are you saying that it's recommended, or they should, or they have to disclose that in public at council meetings?
That's my position. I wrote a book on ethics, so I go a little bit farther than maybe the normal person would, but I just think if you're comfortable, you shouldn't do it unless you're comfortable disclosing it. And here's another thing is, what about if you're going to give that developer an hour or two of lunchtime, are you going to do the same thing for the chair of the homeowners association that wants the same amount of time? And then how do you exhibit fairness there for doing it. If if you do it for one, then why not the other? Now, the rules, go by the rules, and the rules are fair. 10 minutes per side for each one. And so I am saying that, but I don't, on the other hand, I don't expect everyone to follow my advice there.
I'm gonna readily say, this is my problem. I expect everybody to follow those rules. I expect everybody to follow the sunshine rules. I expect my elected officials not to use their phones, emails, and texts to caucus each other or talk about a fishing trip with a developer or a dinner with a developer or a landowner. I expect, as a citizen sitting in that audience, to hear every conversation at a work session about why it's thought that proposal is good or not good for the citizens of the city. But that's me, and I recognize that some people may not like that. I just expect, when I go talk to a doctor, and I was trying to promote a new procedure to them, I told them if everything goes well, I could do it. If something goes wrong, this is where it's gonna go wrong. And so, some doctors would agree to take that risk and some wouldn't. And so I expect my elected officials to talk about what works about a proposal and what doesn't work about a proposal. They don't have to disclose in the work session how they're gonna vote. At least discuss what is good and what works for the citizens and what doesn't. And I can assure you that if things come before us, I'm gonna be asking the developer, what about this proposal is good for the city? When our comprehensive plan says this development should mitigate its impact on the citizens, I expect them to say something. And if they don't, we've got a comprehensive plan that if our elected officials follow that comprehensive plan, very few things would be controversial. That's my opinion. And so,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Fair enough. No need to apologize.
No.
Other comments on it?
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
I do have a question. Does anyone on the planning commission or the council have are they developers in any form?
Sometimes they are, in this, I don't think.
I know,
it's the
I've
case
known
in
it to
this
happen,
commission.
and seems like their projects always go
More
through.
often than not.
in other places.
There's a 40 to 50% real estate interest on planning commissions, believe it or not.
I
In my
believe it.
experience,
I believe it.
They're usually,
Yes.
they put somebody on that's real estate oriented.
Yes.
So, an observation,
We have to,
Christine?
in real estate. Okay.
an
They
obs-
don't have properties listed that we're voting on.
Yeah.
Or own property that they're wanting.
Right.
Okay.
Just have a good knowledge.
One of the things that I observed with a mayor 2 terms ago, I remember just being here sitting in the audience, and I was so impressed when she stopped the meeting and said, and they were talking about property development, she goes, I own the property next door, full disclosure. And for me, I was like, man, that's awesome. Probably no impact on her at all, but she put all of her cards on the table. And I'm just trying to tie that back. I think, and going back to the ethics, I'm a firm believer in the KISS principle, keeping it simple, stupid. And I think the city council folks have an ethics thing. I think we ought to just adopt whatever they do, and let's not do anything special. Just keep it real simple so we're all following the same railroad track. Just a thought.
Okay. Good deal. Others on this issue? Any others on that same issue? Okay, well, all right, let's talk about making motions then. There's a lot here on this. In a nutshell, you get the floor, meaning you get recognized by the chair who's presiding the meeting, and you can introduce a motion. You can make a motion. Motions require a second in order to proceed. If you don't have a second, that means nobody's interested in it and it's going to die. It dies for lack of second. But every motion has to be seconded. Now, sometimes motions are not clear, and if you immediately feel like, hey, I don't even understand what this is, anybody can ask for a clarification. Would you please restate that motion, or would you clarify what you mean by, a black vinyl fence? What do you mean by that, or whatever it might be? See, yeah,
When you say anybody can make a clarification,
on the
you're talking
commission.
about anybody that's on the commission or that's on the legislative body.
Yeah, anybody who's a member of that doesn't give a member of the public the right to come in and say, I don't understand your motion, could you please, that's out of order.
Okay.
But anybody on the body can do that. Now, this will come up later, and we probably will not go through all of these scenarios that I have in here, because I'm touching on some of them right now. But one of the signs of an inexperienced commission member is when they make a motion and they don't wait for a second and they immediately begin to advocate why they're making the motion without a second. That would be one where the chair says, you give them a little bit of leeway they might have a sentence or two that they want to kind of explain why they made the motion, then you give them that much room, give them a little bit of a leash. But if they start going into, and the reasons why I want to made this motion were X, Y, and Z, and A, B, and C, and it's like, wait a minute, no, the rest of the commission, you got to have a second there. That means it's going to be discussed, and then save it for discussion on the motion. Okay, so you make a motion, you get a second, and then you're the first in line to be able to talk about that according to Robert's rules. You made the motion, so you're the first in line. You can talk about that. You can make your case for why you made the motion and stuff. You can second a motion even though you don't agree with it. Now, why would you do that? Because you want to discuss it. Because you want to tell them all the reasons why you don't like their motion. So a lot of times people will say, I second that motion for purposes of discussion only. Meaning they want the public and the others to know, hey, I don't want you to think I'm automatically going to vote for this, but I'm going to second it because I want to talk about it. So that's fair, and you need to know that may be the case.
Is there a proper way to gain the floor? Is there to say, hey, I want to talk?
Most of the time, the discussion will turn around to it's ready for a motion. Everybody, we've gone through, the public hearing has been closed. Now, discussion or a motion. Sometimes, and another thing that sometimes people do incorrectly or ill-advisedly, if that's a word, is to start talking about what they want to do about the motion, but not, that they make a motion and it was ill-conceived. It wasn't really carefully thought out, and then that causes everybody problem, because then it's like, one member doesn't understand it, it's vague, or it didn't include something else, and, people were talking about this discussion and they should have included that little one thing that, say, Scott Butler wanted in the motion, and they could have done that. Now he's going to come back and say, can I amend the motion? And it just gets all sort of hairy and nasty kind of thing that you don't need to get into. So be careful about when before you make the motion. Now, when the chair, let's say we have a motion and we have a second, and then there's discussion, and you get ready. I think this statement of question on the motion is, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but there is something where you say, I call the question. Now, people don't do that. Council members don't do it. Planning commissioners don't, because that ends debate. And it forces, according to Robert's rules, it forces you into acting on the motion. Call to question means I'm telling you that we need to end the debate and move ahead. I don't think, I'd have to check the book, I don't think that's debatable. I think a call to question is, the chair's obligated to call that to question, meaning you gotta call for a vote at that time. Yeah?
I'd just like to make a comment. So as you know, we were in Savannah taking training, and I took the Robert's Rules training. And, I thought I would share this with you.
Yeah, thank you.
There was a YouTube, and I'll see if I can find it, I'll send it to you, you'll get a big kick out of it. There was a motion, and there was 18, I, make a motion to amend the motion by doing something. And there was 18 of them. And then the chair finally called me. That called the motion.
Call the question.
That's enough, yeah, 18.
Oh, gee.
Yeah, amendments, substitutions, I mean, we're a small body, we really don't need to go there. Sometimes, and I mean, even like Jefferson City Council, I've been to so many of those meetings, and they get, every once in a while, 1 out of 20, they'll get crossed up on something, and it's like, hey, you know, somebody will say, just withdraw the motion, you know, let's start over, don't get into this. I got a motion to amend, a motion, then there's a motion to amend, and you act on the amendment first, then you go to the full motion, and what if something happens in between there, and you get all crossed up, and I'm not an expert, but I can't follow and tell you absolutely everything you need to do. So it's just, if it goes awry, punt, step back, and say, let's withdraw that motion, please, withdraw the second, let's start over, let's get this right.
So
Question, comment?
So you're saying then that if a motion is made and seconded, and then everybody wants to start making amendments, you can withdraw the motion and withdraw the second, without seeing the motion and the second through to a vote?
No, you have to ask to withdraw the motion, and the person who normally I've seen it, this person who seconds it also has to agree to withdraw it. And then if it is, the chair can just, if it looks like there's consensus to withdraw, the chair can say, I consider it withdrawn, or you can vote to withdraw, Again, we can get mired in detail, and we're not Parliament here. We're not Congress.
We're not a real voting body, we're just a recommending body.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about something else, but anyway.
Yeah, we don't have to get in the weeds like that. So, I mean, amending a motion or substitution, and I hear this term, people often say, will you accept a friendly amendment? Have you ever heard that?
No, I've heard that.
You hadn't heard that? They'll say, will you accept a friendly amendment to include such and such? And there's not really any such thing, but that's the sort of informality that maybe we can and should get away with if we want to. But, I mean, if you could do it that way, you could say, well, would you accept an amendment to your motion to include a black vinyl fence is required along the south property line, or something like that? And if they said yes, then, you know, you can work that out. If nobody's, rules are there when people disagree. If you guys aren't disagreeable, we don't have to go through a lot of hefty rules, in my opinion. It's just a waste of time. Okay, so you adopt or reject that motion, number 11 on the list. If it's a tie, what happens?
It's
If you have
not
6 members here
approved.
tonight and you voted 3-3, what would happen to the motion?
It's not approved.
The motion is denied, yeah. It didn't die, it just failed.
Right.
Okay? It didn't die, it failed. So, all right. Any other questions on these items here? Comments? Well, there I go, slap happy again. Okay, you asked the question, how do you gain the floor? Got to be recognized by the presiding officer before speaking. You know, you don't have to do, like I said, the the chair recognizes the gentleman from Nebraska, it doesn't have to be that formal or anything like that, but you can just, if nobody's trying to gain the floor, you kind of let them do it, and you don't have to be really formal about it. If two are trying to talk at one time, then the chair's going to have to manage that and say, no, you have the floor, wait your turn, kind of thing. Okay?
Just like kids.
Okay. So how to make a motion? I move that we recommend approval of Z 24-02 based on the findings of the planning staff or whatever it might be. It can be as simple as motion for approval, but remember what, like in the case of the city council, they can sometimes not be that clear. I'm thinking more Jefferson than I am Houston, where somebody will just say motion to approve it. Well, what does that mean? You're really, number one, you're recommending approval. You're not making a motion to approve it. And you just need to be careful about the way you say it. I was going somewhere with that, and now I've lost it. But
It would be similar, like we would say, I'd move to, that we approve this based on the conditions set forth by our planner as read.
yeah. Well, thank you. What I was thinking of is like in the case of the city councils, they have an ordinance that's that's a component of their package. That's the expectation, is that they are going to approve or deny that ordinance, okay, that ordinance approving the rezoning, let's say. And so they may say, I make a motion to approve the rezoning. Well, that's okay, we know what you're wanting to do. But really what you're doing is you're making a motion to approve ordinance number 24-2 as written, as a part of the record. Then it may have 14 conditions in there. Okay, so if you as the commission member make a motion to approve it, and there's a staff report that says approve it with 14 conditions, then I'm going to ask the question, did you mean to recommend approval of it with the conditions of the staff report or without the condition? I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but just be clear. If you don't like those conditions, you can say, I move to approve it without any conditions, or without conditions number 7, 9, and 10, however you want to do it. But just be clear about what it is, because then others are going to maybe, and this is why it's sometimes good, it's hard to be a chair and articulate that motion again, because sometimes they get complicated. But a good chair will go, we have a motion by such and such, seconded by such and such to do X, Y, and Z. Now we have discussion, okay? Now, and you really need to, and Mayor, I told you this once, I'm not trying to single you out or anything, but one thing, the only criticism I'd have is that you've jumped into make a motion and a second, and you immediately ask all those in favor. So you're calling it to question when somebody may want to discuss that motion. So you got one little step before that, which is, and the chair should do this too, and you'll hear me say that, we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the item? Most of the time, you've already done that, but there might be somebody who wants to discuss it. They may not understand it. They, for whatever reason. So, no offense, with all respects, Mayor. Okay. Okay. All motions except for a point of order require a second to be debated and considered. If there's no second, the chair asks, is there a second? And one that doesn't get a second dies for a lack of second. You can say, I second the motion, I second it, or just second. You don't have to be too wordy with it. You do not have to get the floor to second a motion, you know that. It implies, if you second it, that you're ready to discuss it, that it's properly voted on, but that doesn't mean that you favor it. You can, again, like I said before, you can second a motion, and you're doing that for purposes of discussion. It doesn't mean you're going to vote for it. And most of the time you do that by saying, for purposes of discussion only. Then that tells everybody, it's not like I'm enthusiastically supporting this motion because I'm ready to vote in favor of it. I want it out there. Let's vote. Let's talk about it. Let's vote on it, and so forth. Okay. Clarify your wording. If it's unclear, by all means, if you don't know what the motion was, you definitely want to seek clarification. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes these motions are not that clear, and if you don't know what you're voting on, by all means, step up and ask for clarification. And then in that case, if the chair can re-articulate the motion, they can do that. Or they may, sometimes you go to the clerk and you say, we're all confused. Please read that one back to us for the record. Can you tell us what that motion was? Because we're not even sure what it was. That happens. Okay. So another little cartoon here, and this one I wanted to spend a minute on because it really hits pretty close to home here. It shows you, number one, that planners treat this stuff about road connections and stuff seriously, and that's one of the big things we look at when a plat comes in is the road network, the way we want to do it. And so here he is. Notice there's two guys. He's leaning one way, and leaning the other way. One's at the Planning Commission, one's at the County Commission. This is a little facetious, but there could be some truth to it. He says, oh, sure, we'll provide that street connection next to our development. And then he gets to the County Commissioner or City Council and says, that's an unfair condition. We don't want that in there. So it's like, sometimes you get a little bit of inconsistency there between Planning Commission and City Council.
Wait a minute. You don't get inconsistency between a good legislative body and a planning commission that's going by our comprehensive plan. The inconsistency is in the developer.
True, definitely, yeah. That's right. 6 weeks late. Okay. All right. So like I'm suggesting, and this is a hard task to do properly, but the chair, if you can, is, especially when it's unclear, you'll restate the motion. It doesn't hurt to restate the motion so that everybody knows what you're voting on. So once you have a motion and a second, presiding officer says, okay, we have a motion on the floor, meaning it's there to discuss. Let's debate, let's discuss it, let's get to a motion to resolve the matter. Nothing really. The person making the motion has the right to speak first. Let's remember that, because that's just a, somebody might want to jump in and start talking. It's like, well, wait a minute, let's go to the person who made the motion. Let them have the first shot at it. All right. As long as that person doesn't violate rules, they have the right to continue, and you should not interrupt them. You can't close debate as long as some other member who wants to speak, who hasn't spoken yet, gets an opportunity to speak. What's this 2/3 vote here? Let's see. Cannot close debate so long as any member who has not exhausted the right to debate desires the floor, except by order of the board which requires a two-thirds vote. I don't know about this. I think this is somebody, you know, in the Senate, they call it filibuster, you know, where somebody gets up and speaks. And I guess that could get really old if somebody was like deliberately just carrying on and on and on. Then maybe somebody could interject, interrupt, and ask for a floor vote to end debate, or simply call the question, right? That call the question's what's out there to, and I don't hear that done very often or at all, because it's a little, I wouldn't say it's rude, but, it's a highly controlling thing. You know, why would you not want to listen to your fellow colleagues who want to debate and talk about it? And, you know, why would you really want to cut that short unless it's just gone haywire, in which case maybe you do call the question. Comments? All right, amendments, we talked about that. It's probably best just try not to amend stuff. If it's a simple thing and you can get your person who made the motion to agree, that's fine. If it's gets convoluted, you're better off trying to say, that's when the chair steps in and said, we're in a kind of quandary here. We're not getting anywhere. Let's clear the air. Let's back up and start over. Sometimes that's not a bad thing to do by any means. Substituting a motion, you can do that. I've never seen this done in a meeting. Maybe once or twice.
So somebody would say there'd be a motion, but not seconded, and somebody would offer a second.
No, it would be a motion that was seconded, and then somebody offer. So like say Scott, you made a motion that was seconded to recommend approval of the rezoning. And then I came in and said, well, I want to make a substitute motion to recommend approval with conditions 1, 2, and 3. Then we could debate both motions at the same time, and whichever one, I'm not sure exactly how this works, but when you call the question on one of them, and probably vote on the substitute motion first, I would guess, but I don't know. But better to stay away from this, you know. This is we're covering contingencies we probably won't see. Motion to postpone. When you postpone something, the lawyers will always tell you need a date certain for when that's going to be. You want to say when are you postponing it to? When you lay something on the table, that means it can come back up at any time, and it's got no expiration point or something. Yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out, because I also learned in the training over the last several days, we do a lot of, motion to table here, and that's the wrong wording. It is actually
Postpone.
motion to postpone with a date, not table. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, and by the way, if you
Tabling the indefinite, is that
Correct.
Oh,
At least
okay.
that's what I believe I was taught over the last week, and I think Jerry said.
Okay.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you see something that I'm saying that, you know, you have experts that are teaching you guys, you see anything at odds, please bring it up. It's fair.
My goal is to correct you on one thing in my life.
We'll run you over in the parking lot.
You're ready to get back at me for that? Okay. Withdrawing a motion. You got a request to withdraw. The person seconding it should agree to withdraw, and then the board. Like I've already covered this. If no one objects, the chair can say that motion is withdrawn. If you feel like there's contention about it, you can call for a vote to withdraw, but that's just a little bit.
Tabling is correct.
When a pending matter is tabled correctly, it is set aside with no provision for bringing it back at any specific time.
Thank you.
Good. Okay,
I'm sorry, excuse me, Dr. Jerry.
yeah,
On that last one, motion to withdraw,
yeah,
Sebastian had a second on that, right?
yeah.
Okay.
The member seconding the motion agrees to the withdrawal. Has to agree. All right, we've almost reached an hour and a half. I want to kind of wrap up. I'm not sure I have a whole bunch more. The motion gets disposed of. You either approve it, you disapprove it, you postpone it, etc. So the words you like to use is, is there any more discussion on this motion? Hearing none, or there being no further discussion, a motion is in order, or are you ready for a motion? And again, the presiding officer can remind people with short memories, most of us, what it is you're voting on. Because if you go in for 10 minutes, 15 minutes debating something, it's pretty easy for any of us to kind of forget what was it exactly that we were doing.
What was the motion we're voting on?
You know?
Where did it start?
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Those opposed, no. Some say all those in favor of the motion say aye. Those opposed, like sign, meaning say aye. But I like aye and nay, or aye and no. Why use the same sign for something when it's the opposite? So that's just a little thing, a little pet peeve of mine. The zoning code, I'm gonna skip over this. That's just a little funny thing about. Let me read one of them. Clever and intricate. You'll have to go back and reread it just to figure out what it says. This is true. Okay. You'll see us here combining hearings. When we have agenda sessions with the mayor and council, we talk about that. We say, here's similar items. Let's call these together as public hearings, one public hearing, and then we don't have to isolate these things and give 10 minutes for each one. If there's a variance that goes along with a rezoning, you can call those up at the same time. You're following the same public hearing procedures. Okay? All right, this is gonna be the last one, because I told you it'd be an hour and a half. I don't wanna go farther unless you guys wanna stay longer, but, individual cases, we have a public hearing procedure that's written into the zoning ordinance, and that's what we're required to follow. We call the cases in order of the agenda, although you can amend the agenda sometimes if you think, for example, there's one at the, where there's a lot of people that want to speak and you know why they're there, and it's fourth on the agenda,